J'ai quand même envie, en commençant, de vous présenter un petit peu plus la série de webinaires. Donc, aujourd'hui, c'est le 6e webinaire d'une série de 7. Ce sont des webinaires en planification autochtone. Et ma collègue Émy Rainville, qui ne pouvait pas se joindre à nous comme panéliste aujourd'hui, mais qui est quand même dans le public, on a travaillé ensemble pour réfléchir au concept de cette série-là. Pour nous, la planification autochtone, c'est reformer le cercle et c'est planifier à partir de qui on est. Donc, toute la série de webinaires a été pensée avec ça en tête. Les 4 premiers webinaires, c'était des webinaires qui nous ont vraiment permis de se réenraciner et de planifier à partir de qui on est. Donc, on a commencé avec la relation avec le territoire. Ensuite, on a reparlé des récits, de la langue et de la culture comme des endroits à partir de où commencer, mais aussi qui pouvaient nous enseigner comment planifier. Ensuite, on a parlé de relations, de reformer le cercle et de comment prendre soin et être en sécurité ensemble. Dans le 4e webinaire, on a parlé de gouvernance, de rôle et responsabilité. Donc, comment se rappeler comment prendre des décisions ensemble en respectant tout le monde. Et dans le webinaire de la semaine dernière, là, on a commencé la 2e phase de la série. Et là, on a commencé à explorer la planification communautaire globale comme une forme très actuelle de planification autochtone. Et donc, la semaine dernière, on a vraiment regardé ensemble comment commencer une démarche. Il y avait Francine White qui était là aujourd'hui, qui est une de nos panélistes qui va se représenter dans un instant. Et ça nous a vraiment permis d'explorer comment commencer. Aujourd'hui, pour le 6e webinaire, on est vraiment excités parce qu'on a 3 panélistes fantastiques. On s'excuse, on a notre collègue Marjolaine McKenzie qui devait être là aussi, puis malheureusement, elle a eu des problèmes techniques, puis elle ne pourra pas se joindre à nous aujourd'hui. Mais on pense fort à elle parce que ce n'est que partie remise. Une autre fois, elle pourra se joindre à nous, on a déjà hâte. Mais aujourd'hui, on va vraiment explorer le cœur de la planification communautaire de la démarche. Et ça inclut des activités de communication, des activités de mobilisation communautaire, de la recherche, de la collecte et de l'analyse de données, puis aussi comment créer une vision des priorités puis identifier des valeurs. Donc ça, c'est ce qu'on va faire aujourd'hui. Alors, sans plus tarder, avant d'aller aux présentations de nos panélistes, je vais vous dire que moi, je m'appelle Catherine Bélan. Je suis coordonnatrice en planification à l'Institut de développement durable des Premières Nations Québec-Labrador depuis 10 ans et demi maintenant. Moi, j'ai grandi en territoire Innu, je suis autochtone et maintenant, j'habite en territoire Anishinaabe, à Rouyn-Noranda. Et là, je suis super contente parce qu'il y a mon amie Kimberly Roy qui est là ici aujourd'hui. Et je la remercie particulièrement, elle et tout le peuple Abitibi-Winnie, de prendre soin de ce territoire-là. Puis sachez que je fais de mon mieux pour en prendre soin aussi, parce que c'est un territoire que j'aime profondément. Donc, je vais inviter tout d'abord Francine White à se présenter. Francine, oui, c'est encore et toujours un honneur de t'avoir avec nous. J'aurais envie que tu nous partages qui tu es, d'où tu viens, et puis comment tu t'es retrouvée à avoir un rôle en planification et pourquoi est-ce que la planification puis la mobilisation, c'est des choses qui sont importantes pour toi?
Okay, Kwe Kakena. Bonjour tout le monde. Hi everybody. Waba Pinesh Western Indigenous Cause. Kitigan ZB Ninja Ba. Mikazu Nin Odomin. So Kitigan ZB is our ancestral territory that I'm talking to you from today. And in the area where it begins, which is the Ottawa River watershed. And it includes the Ottawa River from the headwaters near the Lake of Two Mountains toward Montreal, and it forms a boundary between Ontario and Quebec and then goes up north. So, and I know Bradley and Kimberly, these are our cousins communities that share the territory with us. So it's nice to see you. And so the land lies 65% on the Quebec side, 35% on the Ontario side. But if you really look into the history of Anishinaabe ancestral territory. It actually goes all the way up to the White House door. But you know, we tend to talk about it along the lines of borders that have been established. So I'm going to talk a bit today because I learned lots in the CCP. We tend to talk and focus on land, but we don't mention, and we talk about the water in almost all, usually a spiritual sense. But what we found out in the CCP is we started to really think about who we are and the land that we share. The Ottawa River Basin encompasses 19 tributaries, and it's one of the greatest rivers on the continent, the second largest river in Eastern Canada, and it forms part of the Canadian Shield. And one of the interesting facts is the volume of water in the Ottawa River is equivalent to the volume of water in all of Western Europe. So think about that when you think about who's trying to claim this land and make us a 51st state. You know, and you really think about the importance of water. And this is who, you know, who we are, the land of water. And so this is where our ancestral territory comes in, and we really begin to look at it, and planning as we go forward really has to think about not only the land but the water. And the other question was, what brought me to do comprehensive community planning? And so Kitigan-Zibi, where I did the plan, it was they wanted developed a 25-year plan on 8 topic areas, you know, looking at health, social, economic, governance, there was and a number of areas. So they wanted a 25-year plan and a costing out of that plan, which they tendered, and I got the contract for that. But really my passion that I bring to it is, you know, it's related to my experience. I've had a lot of international, national, regional experience working on all those different topics that I just mentioned. And I just at the point in my life where I was saying, okay, if we're going to make any changes in the world, it's got to come from within. So it really meant coming home. And it was it was a great experience because I had the opportunity to talk to people I hadn't seen in a long time. The methods we used to gather the data, you know, it could range from a community meeting, a small luncheon meeting with women. There were so many different approaches that we use. Some people wanted to play golf while we talked, so I got to do all of these different activities with people. And at home, we've had a lot of deaths this year, many, and so many of the people I spoke to are no longer with us. So I really feel a special connection to CCP now because they shared so much knowledge with us. And really, in my passion for the comprehensive community planning is really, it's a lifetime of work and experience that I'm now at the point in my life where I feel I have gained the knowledge and skills and some wisdom to share, particularly with the young people. And what's really exciting about is that I think is that we're at an historical turning point where real development, real decolonization can begin. And it's the youth who are going to play that role. They've grown up in a new era. They're ready, and that's the most exciting part, I think, of it. And you know, it's a real passion with me is how do we help them just change, you know, from where our history has kind of been to just really knowing our territory and our roles and our potential and our power. So that's my passion.
Miigwech, Francine. Wow, what a beautiful way to start us off. There are already so many questions we can ask just with that. But before we do that, I want to go to one of those young, amazing Anishinaabe people that you just talked about, who is doing the CCP path in his community. Bradley Polson, welcome. Please introduce yourself to our amazing participants. We're so glad you're here.
My name is Bradley Polson. I'm a Anishinaabe youth from Long Point First Nation. I currently serve as the CCP coordinator, and I'm also taking the role as a communications officer within the community. My journey has been, has up and downs, but, I always, wanted to be involved in, planning, community-led planning in my community. I'm always pushing, for transparency between, governance and the community, engagement with, not only youth, but other, groups in the community, elders, men, women, family, and, just pushing for long-term sustainability, within my community and for all communities as well. I believe that, our voices, our stories, and, our decisions, like Francine said, it must come from within. And that belief has, driven my work and, developing, communication strategies for the different departments that I work with, pushing for that governance transparency, getting the people the information right away, and just ensuring that our community members, especially the youth, are they're involved in shaping the future of our community. For me, planning is not just creating documents. It's creating ownership, empowerment, just having a collective vision for anyone that is part of the community and the future generations. So that's why I believe community-led engagement is so important. It ensures that all decisions reflect all the voices within the community. There's lots of things that motivate me to stay within CCP. I really I am pushing for more youth involvement. I'm currently involved in empowering the youth council within my community. They're not just the future leaders; they're the leaders now. So we recently had our first training on meeting management because, well, the youth council in the community is very, very new. So it would be good to start with them with the tools that they need to carry on. So for my goal is to have them serve as the CCP team to listen to the people's voices and create that link between the youth and the elders, the youth and the community members, men, women. So that's and strengthening communication between all the members. If people don't know what's happening, they can't participate. So clear, accessible information helps bridge that gap between leadership and the membership. And the core that I think that we all should focus on is preserving our identity in all those measures. Planning should always reflect our values, language, and traditions. And I'm very, very happy to be part of the planning in my community. And I'm excited to be staying in this role for quite a while. So, miigwech.
Miigwech, Bradley. We can certainly feel the passion, the excitement. I think it's already inspiring all of us. So miigwech for being here. We're really glad. I'm going to switch to French to welcome my friend and colleague, Kwe Kimberly. Je suis tellement content. On est tellement content que tu sois là aujourd'hui. C'est ton premier webinaire et je vais t'inviter, si tu as envie, à nous partager qui tu es, d'où tu viens, puis aussi qu'est-ce qui t'a mené à la planif communautaire, à la mobilisation communautaire, qu'est-ce qui te passionne là-dedans. Donc, bienvenue.
Miigwech, Catherine, Kwe Kakina, Nin Kimberly-Roy. Je suis Abitibi-Winnikwé de Picogan. Moi, en fait, ce qui me passionne dans la planification communautaire, en fait, j'ai été coordonnatrice à la planification communautaire. Je joue quand même un rôle concernant la révision du plan communautaire actuellement. Ça me tient vraiment à cœur de connaître l'histoire, de voir d'où ce qu'on vient, C'est important. Je me suis rendu compte de ça. C'était pas une chose qui m'était nécessairement... je l'ai appris à force de le faire. Également, je vous dirais que ce qui me passionne, ce qui m'a passionné dès le départ, c'est de voir les rêves, les aspirations des jeunes. C'est une chose tellement importante de voir que, dans le fond, les jeunes ils puissent se projeter puis voir qu'on pourrait se développer, qu'on a une force en nous, dans le fond, pour être des leaders, comme qui dit Bradley. C'est impressionnant. C'est tout. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Kimberly. Et merci d'être là. Merci du travail que tu fais. Merci aussi du rappel de l'importance de l'histoire. Puis, Francine, elle en a parlé un peu quand elle a parlé de tous les gens qu'elle avait interviewés qui, pour certains, ne sont plus là, sont passés dans le monde des esprits. Mais la planification communautaire telle qu'on la pratique aujourd'hui, c'est pas quelque chose de nouveau. C'est quelque chose qui a toujours existé de différentes manières. La planif communautaire, c'est le résultat de très longues traditions de planification dans votre nation et dans chacune de vos communautés, ça s'est fait toujours différemment. Puis la planif communautaire aujourd'hui, ça nous permet de se réapproprier vraiment comment faire une planification qui est holistique, qui est inclusive et qui part vraiment de qui on est. Donc, c'est ça, ça fait partie des choses qu'on va aborder aujourd'hui, mais j'avais envie, avant même de commencer, de remercier tous les ancêtres qui ont fait qu'on est là aujourd'hui. Peu importe de quelle nation qu'on est, c'est parce qu'eux ont travaillé vraiment fort puis qu'on est là. Puis je remercie aussi Francine de nous rappeler que la planification communautaire, c'est une bonne façon de transmettre les enseignements d'une génération à l'autre, puis de faire le lien entre les générations. Donc, merci pour cette introduction-là. Et là, avant d'aller plus loin, j'ai envie de vous demander à vous, nos 25 participants qui viennent d'un peu partout. Il y en a déjà quelques-uns qui ont commencé à écrire dans le chat et on est super contents. Donc, j'aimerais ça vous proposer de prendre un moment pour écrire à nos panélistes qui vous êtes, d'où vous venez, de quel territoire vous nous écrivez. Prenez un moment, s'il vous plaît, là, nos super participants pour écrire aux panélistes, là, juste d'où vous venez, de quel territoire. Puis même si vous avez déjà une question en lien avec la planification, on vous invite à la mettre déjà là, dans le chat. On va vous laisser 1 ou 2 petites minutes pour faire ça. C'est vraiment important là, pour les panélistes d'avoir une idée de qu'est-ce qui est dans la salle. Et là, je ne sais pas si Kimberly t'a regardé, là, mais il y a déjà Sue qui t'écrit qu'elle est bien fière de te voir un peu partout. Puis Darren qui t'écrit aussi là, que tu es vraiment un modèle là, pour les gens de Picogan. Donc, tu as déjà des belles salutations qui sont dans le chat.
Miigwech.
Donc, on va laisser aux gens le temps d'écrire. Mais pendant que ça se fait, je pense qu'on va... super. Donc, on a Jade qui est là, de Mastroyat qui est avec nous. On est super contente. Bienvenue. Bienvenue. Prenez votre temps. Moi, je vais repasser à l'anglais pour commencer déjà notre discussion. I'm going to switch back to English as we start this. Francine, you started telling us a little bit about about Kiriganzibi Anishnabe's CCP process. You were the full-time coordinator for your community between 2020 and 2024, more or less, 2021. You might have to correct me on that. Do you want to walk us through some of the main steps of your planning process?
Okay. I started in 2021 in around July of 2021 and then went through right to 2024. So I was 3 years involved in the CCP planning process. And as I mentioned, we looked at 8 areas that included land, social, economic development, health, governance. And we had one extra area that we looked at, and it was called Who Speaks For Us? And Chief and Council wanted some feedback on who's out there talking on behalf of Kitigan-Zibi, because there were many, and people had questions about that. So that question was added to bring some clarity about when and who would speak, and those became very interesting sessions as well. And I mainly worked with the elders on that. But so the whole planning process, it kind of, I made a plan. I mean, I think, planning's pretty straightforward. You come up with a plan, but then you actually do it and it all changes. And mine changed many times. But this is the approach I took, and there were about, I'd say, 4 or 5 stages that emerged. And the first stage, I really wanted to get a good grounding of who we were, who we are, who we want to become. And so the language played the most important part there. And my first inclination was to really involve the people who were working in the language area and really look at how we build language into the CCP. But what came from that also, not only as a planning tool, but it really became a discussion about who we are and how it's all captured into language, which of course is based on the land. So we spent a lot of time on understanding that. And then I hadn't planned to really do that. So, things take on their own form. I also established in the first stage was some committees. I thought we'd have 6 key committees. And I worked on the terms of reference. As Bradley says, it's a transparent process, and we did the exact same thing. At once we'd established the committees, and I started working with the youth committee. In order to get everybody on the same page, we really had to go back to meeting 101, and how do you run a meeting? How do you put an agenda together? How do you chair a meeting? So and it was interesting because chief and council really wanted to meet with the or some members of council wanted to meet with the youth committee, and they said, no, we don't even know what we're doing yet. But we did look, stop and take some time to take stock of those kind of things in order to, and some of the youth on that committee, they were like, they were very, very advanced in running leadership positions. But at the same time, others were new to the process. Others had never, done a Zoom session. So all these things, it was, getting people comfortable, and bringing up, trying to get some skills in the group that they could also use as tools. So what happened, out of the 6 committees, there's only really 3 that came to be. There were chief and council decided at some point that they need to review their committee structures. There were becoming very many committees in the community, and they needed to really get a bit of a more framework around that. So I ended up working with the youth committee, and that one I absolutely, you cannot plan a future without the youth. And then the language committee, as I said, I worked with them for a while, and then, well, the elders, we just gathered, and the elders said we'll meet when we want, and didn't really matter what council said. They wanted to have a meeting, they would. So those were the people I worked closely with, and I really would have liked to had a women's committee to put a woman's lens on that. Given our history and what's happened to women in our community. And then I would have liked an economic development committee, but we did have managed to have some meetings with these different groups in the community. So that was the first stage, and it had already changed. The second stage for planning was really about learning and situating ourselves, and we did and to do that, I really worked on planning a series of sessions. Just didn't want to be gathering people and saying, okay, what should we do in economic development, or how should social development be approached? Wanted to give, I really thought it was important that we give some background information on some, what the current thinking is around these topic areas. What some insights and some possible approaches before that we could use, and before we got into asking people, what they thought, just to sort of orient everybody. And so when we worked it all out, we ended up doing an orientation session, where we're at, getting feedback from the community and sort of where we want to go into the future and validating what we were hearing. So that meant we ended up planning for 24 sessions throughout the 3 years. And we actually got 21 of them over those 3 years. We did 10 sessions a year, and with different community people in the community. And then the third stage was the actual data gathering, where we held these 30 panel sessions and different workshops. But it also included going and attending other community meetings that were going on. That could have been the community meeting we have on monthly with chief and council, or some specialized areas that the community was involved in studying at the time. For instance, the Moose Moratorium Committee had done some really good work, and created a whole session where they brought in the experts that were part of a study. So we got to hear what they said and work with them and their feedback. So and then the stage 4 was really creating the vision for each of those 8 areas. So we gathered the data, and what were people saying, what did we hear throughout. And then finally, for me, an added area was costing out the whole 25-year plan, and bringing it back. And this was really important for decision makers, because it really begins to identify what's important, where the priorities are. And really, at this point in the planning, you have your plan. There's a lot of options on the table. There's a lot of change people want to see. And then it goes back to the elected leaders, and starting to think about how they're going to adopt this plan. So that was kind of the approach that I used throughout. And like I said, it changed often, but it was very a very flexible way to do things. And like I said before, I was very lucky, because chief and council, who I was reporting to on every once in a while, they weren't tied to specific methodologies. As long as we were reporting in, and of course I was seeing them every day, because I think I was at every meeting that was held in the community, so I saw them often. And that was I think really good, was that the flexible approach they took to it, and allowed to just emerge as in whatever way was people were willing to talk about what they wanted to see for the future. So that worked out okay. And that was the approach I used. I think that, I don't know if there was another question there.
Well, that's a perfect place to get us started. And I might be wrong, but I think I saw Bradley taking some notes, because Bradley, you're at a different place in your process, right? So I'm gonna go to you next, because your community started, when did you get started? 2023?
Yeah, November 2023 is when I took on the role.
Yeah. So do you want to tell us, like, what, walk us through what you've done so far, but also, like, what are you envisioning in terms of your main activities when it comes to rolling out the next steps of your planning process?
Yeah, for me, I like to think that my role in CCP didn't start when I took on the position. I think it started when I first was involved with the youth council. I was a member of I was the vice chief, and it was the first youth council in Long Point First Nation. But I had to resign due to commitments for schooling, and I just had to take a step away. But when I look back, I noticed that, you know, the youth council hasn't been as involved as we should have been. So, you know, I really wanted to kind of get back into, you know, planning for the community and trying to involve, you know, the youth council as much as we can. So I kind of see, like I'm in the early stages of CCP, and kind of listening to Francine, I am kind of following kind of similar steps I call them phases. So like currently, like I feel like we're on phase 2, but I'll bring you up to speed. Phase 1, you know, it was all about building awareness and just getting the community ready to be involved in CCP. So I had met with you know, council. I met with different groups in the community just to inform them on CCP, what it is, why it matters, how can you be involved. So there were many things like I kind of hosted like focus groups, little engagement sessions just to try to get them uh, involved and ready for the next steps. And one of the biggest things and the challenges was getting the youth council back involved, and trying to get them to serve as the CCP committee. Because I do follow the CCP handbook, which is a very, very good tool for me. And I'm always looking back at it, and I was told I cannot do it alone. So I was trying to get you know, more involved, and I think the youth would be the perfect route to take. And I always looked at Francine for inspiration for that one when I heard what route you took when we had the trauma informed training last year. So I'm always listening at what other communities are doing to get started. So currently, I feel like I'm in the phase 2, where we're kind of making, I guess, we're looking at the situation analysis. You know, we're looking at where we currently are. I'm always, you know, involved in departments when they have focus groups. I'm involved in creating surveys with the different departments, and just to listen to the people at this point. So involving, you know, the different groups in the community, youth, elders, off reserve community members, men, women, just to, you know, try to get inclusiveness in CCP, and just trying to define, you know, the long-term vision of what the community views our community as. So we're still at that area. We're still kind of building awareness and creating a vision. And I'm very involved with like I said, the youth, and I don't want to move on until the youth are ready. We're currently providing the youth council with leadership training. So, you know, how to, you know, have meetings, you know, agendas, you know, roles and responsibilities, and just trying to, you know, keep them motivated. Because, you know, if we don't provide the tools that they need to, you know, lead, then I don't think they're going to, you know, or it will be difficult for them to go on their own. So I just want to make sure they have a little boost to get going. My next step is to, you know, develop, you know, the CCP. You know, I don't know what route we're going to take, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, but I know that we want to prioritize, you know, key projects that, you know, the community members are looking for. Whether it's in housing, economic development, governance. But I think the biggest need I see at the level right now is communication. So establishing, you know, communication methods to, you know, build that transparency between the governance and the community. So I spoke about, you know, getting the community ready. And I think that involves, you know, getting communication channels ready. Um, Newsletters, a website. LPFN is currently developing a communications app to, you know, get real-time notifications to the members, many which are the youth. So we want to connect to the youth a lot more. So we're still, again, in the early stages, getting everything ready, seeing where we are, and then pushing into developing a plan, implementing it, and then just monitoring and adapting it. I don't want to focus too much on the future because I want to do the work right now. So I'm gonna see where it takes me, and I'm just excited to see how the youth can lead us into a bright future.
Just to add to that, it's interesting because it's going to take you all over the place. And that's that's the real learning part of it, and seeing who we are, that, and like I always knew who we are. I knew my history. I knew a lot about the land, everything, but then when you start talking to all these different people, and they take you to all these different places, they tell you things that maybe they weren't ready to tell you when you were younger, but now, that for me anyway, they shared some of the knowledge keepers shared in, words and wisdom with me that I just didn't even know existed. So that's the fun part, and I enjoyed being taken all over the place.
Yeah,
You
and
come out the other end quite wise.
Oh yeah, I'm just happy to be, before, I was in this position, I was always to myself, and this gave me the opportunity, to learn more about, not only my culture, but the needs of the community members, whether it be, youth, elders, men, women, they're um, we all have been through our own journey, our own path, and it's I'm always excited to see where where people want to go. And like you said, it's a winding road, and there's many stops, and sometimes I just like to sit and watch.
Miigwech, Bradley. Yes. And we'll come back to a lot of the things that both you and Francine touched upon. But before we do that, I'm going to switch to French. And Bradley vient justement de nous mentionner que la PCG, ça pouvait être un chemin pas nécessairement très direct. C'est un chemin qui est un peu, qui se promène un peu, qui est tortueux. Mais parlant de ça, tu sais, Kimberly, toi, ton rôle dans la PCG pour la Première Nation Abitibi-Winnie, ça a été un rôle vraiment unique. Tu as eu, je dirais, des opportunités, des défis uniques d'arriver comme troisième coordonnatrice PCG pour ta communauté. Quand la PCG a commencé en 2016, à l'époque, c'était Chantal Kistabiche, qui est maintenant votre chef, qui était la coordonnatrice. Ensuite, il y a eu ton collègue Darren Germain qui a eu la coordination pendant un moment. Puis ensuite, c'est toi qui as repris ça. Et là, tu es arrivé avec plein de données, plein de mobilisations qui avaient été déjà faites. Parle-nous un peu de comment ça s'est passé pour toi là, au début de reprendre la coordination. Tu sais, comment tu t'es retrouvé dans tout ce qu'il y avait là, puis comment tu as remobilisé les gens à travers tes activités aussi?
Oui, Catherine, en fait, c'était plus facile que je pensais parce que Darren, il y avait déjà un plan aussi quand je suis arrivée. Chantal, elle avait déjà les comptes rendus aussi. Il y avait déjà toute une façon de faire qui était établie pour la planification communautaire globale. Donc, ça m'a vraiment aidé à me faire un plan. Mais par exemple, je mettais mes activités, je planifiais toutes mes activités parce que dans le fond, je rencontrais les gens pour justement la mobilisation. Fait que, on faisait des sondages. On a fait, par exemple, on a rencontré les jeunes à la Maison des jeunes avec une tablette. On a utilisé une tablette comme moyen d'obtenir les données. On a aussi été à la journée de l'environnement pour obtenir des données. Donc, tout ça, ça permettait vraiment de faire la collecte de données. Puis, on a récolté plus de 1000 données. de 2016 à, dans le fond, 2024. Donc, c'est ça. Puis comme que, dans le fond, Bradley, il expliquait, j'ai pris des notes tantôt quand il expliquait parce que j'ai aimé comment il l'a divisé en phases. Puis Chantal, elle, était plus, dans le fond, dans préparer la communauté. Elle a récolté aussi des données, donc elle était dans la phase 1 et 2. Darren, lui, il a beaucoup récolté des données, mais Darren, il a été aussi impliqué beaucoup dans la phase 2 et 3, qui est, dans le fond, d'analyser les données, parce que l'IDD et PNQL sont venus avec nous sur le terrain pour analyser l'ensemble des données, parce que 1000 données, c'est pas facile à... à diviser, dans le fond. On les a mis en, comme que Francine, elle expliquait tantôt, on les a séparés en volets, comme il y avait éducation, santé, habitation, infrastructure. Il y avait aussi culture, il y a territoire, il m'en manque un. Éducation, je l'ai dit, santé. Catherine, est-ce que tu peux m'aider?
Infrastructure, tu l'as-tu déjà dit?
Oui,
Infrastructure,
j'ai dit infrastructure,
habitation.
habitation, gouvernance.
Merci,
Voyons, c'est
bravo.
ça.
Surtout qu'il était vraiment important.
Oui, ben oui, excusez-moi, pardon. Donc, il manquait gouvernance. Donc, on l'a divisé par sphère. On a mis les orientations, les actions, les orientations, les actions et les objectifs. Donc, Catherine, elle m'a vraiment aidée. Honnêtement, Catherine et Amy, ils ont été d'une grande aide à ces niveaux-là. C'est vraiment important de permettre aux gens de nous aider puis de s'entourer des bonnes personnes, dans le fond. Ça, c'est vraiment la base là, en PCG parce que tu peux pas tout faire. Je pense que c'est Marie-Ève qui disait ça, qu'on pouvait pas tout faire. Vraiment, c'est l'essentiel, je vous dirais. Puis aussi, dans le fond, là, on est dans la mise en place. Donc, on est en train de faire la rédaction. La rédaction, en fait, est déjà faite. On fait la révision du plan. Puis moi, je suis chargée de projet, puis je vois l'impact que ça a dans la communauté actuellement aussi. Donc, il y a des projets qui s'en viennent à Picogam, qu'ils partent des actions qu'on veut réaliser du plan. Donc, de ce que la communauté demande, plutôt que, par exemple, de ce que le gouvernement demande qu'il se fasse dans nos communautés. Fait que je trouve ça important que c'est bien que ça vienne de nous. J'avais-tu d'autres choses? J'ai pris des petites notes, c'est pas mal ça, je vous dirais.
Juste avant d'aller, je vais avoir une autre question pour Franck. Oh, go ahead, Bradley.
Yeah, just listening to everyone. I just wanted to go back to what I learned in the CCP handbook is that planning, it's not a linear line. It's I like the image of the spiral that reminded me of a tornado. You know, as you start and you go down and you go down and you go down, there'll be times where you'll have to revisit past steps. So you might go back up a level, you might go down. So like Kimberly said, she revised the plan. She had to go back up a step before implementing. So it's when I said a winding road, it's more like a spiral. And I really recommend using the resources at hand. So like the CCP handbook, Kimberly said, Catherine and Emmy have been a very, very big support role. So just using all the existing support and resources is something that also helps me as well. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there too, because I think it was for me, it's very, very important to kind of bounce back between support, resources, and that helps you, be stable in that tornado.
Miigwech, Bradley. Francie, did you want to add something too? Oh, wait. I'm gonna unmute. Oh, you're unmuted. It's good.
I am unmuted. I didn't realize that. No, I was just thinking that, the importance of what Kimberly said. She noted that it's the importance of what our plan is really the importance of making sure that what we do comes from us in order to build the future, because that's really an important point here, because for so long it's been planned for us, or there's been somebody interpreting what we do, and like I said earlier, we are at the turning point now. So that's an important point, I think, to keep making, and you know, saying we're doing it our way, and it's going to be different, and capturing all of that in the plan is certainly key, but not forgetting that point.
Yeah, and before I go, there will be, I'll come back to Nancy's. There's a question from Nancy in the chat, and I'll go to it in a second. But before I do that, because of what you just said, Francine, and because of what you also just said, Kimberly, around like one of the things in CCP that was so awesome for you was this opportunity it gave you to learn about your own history. And so Francine and Kimberly, I want to ask you both, how did you go about, I want to say, like, researching your history? Like, what are some of the ways you used, or some of the resources you used? And then how were you able to integrate that into your CCP? Did you want to go first, Francine?
Okay. Okay. So I mean, it happened in many ways, in many different ways, and like I spoke earlier about the, you know, these 5 stages that I planned out, and it was supposed to happen like in this form, and it just changed. Now that I've finished the plan and looking back to what we did, what I realized, and it just worked out this way, and maybe that's just the way the discussion has to go. It could possibly be a lesson, but so what it turned out when I'm able to stand back and look at everything, the first year was fully a discussion of our history and who we were, and it was all wrapped into language. And then, which of course comes from the land. So that was the grounding point. After we had gone, and it took a whole year to get through that. The second year was, who are we? Where are we at in our point in time? And that was really taking stock of the programs that existed, what we were doing. And then it only really is the third, you know, in the third year, when I was starting to wind up the project, and you know, I had all this data, and I had to start analyzing what I learned. It took way more time to look at this data than I ever realized it was going to do. I spent 6 months, probably a full 6 months, every day writing that final report. Because there was, well, first of all, there was so much data, and that's where your vision comes out. And that got a little more complicated than I thought would be. That was a real challenge for me. And I do work in evaluation, so I know the difference between an outcome, an output, an activity, and all of these things. But when you start to write that all down, it took a lot of thinking to be clear. But then just a wonderful vision emerges. So it happened like, you know, year 1 was grounding our history. Year 2 was, where are we at, and you know, taking stock a lot of what was happening in the community. And then 3 was really, this is what all that data is saying of where we want to be in the future. And it just worked out like that. But I would have never had planned it. I would have never known that was the plan, but the people took me there just by listening to what they were saying. That was my experience.
Et pour toi, Kimberly, comment ça a été la portion de que la PCG soit une façon de te réapproprier de ton histoire et votre histoire collective?
Oui, ben c'est vraiment intéressant parce que dans le fond, ce qui m'a aidé beaucoup, c'est une des collègues du comité de la PCG. On le travaille ensemble, puis par la suite, on ramène au groupe. Puis là, on fait des modifications et tout, et on l'améliore. Mais c'est vraiment par une des collègues qui a des forces en histoire. Puis dans le fond, c'est sûr que les deux, on cherche de notre côté de la documentation. Pour, mettons, sur le lac Abitibi, on a trouvé vraiment beaucoup de documentation. C'est intéressant. On cherchait aussi des photos. On a vraiment, on a trouvé ce qu'on avait de besoin. Donc, on va avoir des images historiques. C'est pas mal ça, là, je vous dirais.
Je pense qu'il y a quelqu'un de ta communauté aussi qui a travaillé sur une ligne du temps puis qui est allé identifier des moments qui étaient importants aussi. Hein.
Oui, excuse-moi. Chantal, dans le fond, elle a demandé à Morégie qui s'habiche. Lui, il est vraiment spécialiste, dans le fond, aussi dans ça. Donc, on s'est basé par... C'est vrai, on s'est basé au départ, c'est sur ça qu'on est parti. Puis par la suite, j'ai regardé dans de la documentation. Fait que ça a comme complémenté ce qui était venu chercher les dates importantes. Il avait fait une ligne du temps avec les dates importantes. Si jamais vous voulez procéder à ça, là, c'est une bonne exemple de...
Ouais. Écoute, je vais même me permettre, là, Kim Chevrier n'est pas là, mais Kim Chevrier, elle a fait le webinaire la semaine passée. Elle était la coordonnatrice PCG pour Québec First Nation. Puis quand elle a fait la ligne du temps pour chez elle, c'était vraiment super aussi. Ils ont pris une autre approche, mais ils ont fait une ligne du temps plus communautaire. Donc, dans un gros souper communautaire, ils avaient fait une rivière du temps sur le mur. Puis ils ont invité tous les gens de la communauté à venir mettre des éléments qu'ils trouvaient importants, d'aussi loin que les gens se rappelaient. Fait que ça a été vraiment le fun de faire cet exercice-là ensemble de mémoire collective, puis de voir aussi qu'est-ce qui était important pour les gens. Fait que c'est le fun parce qu'il y a plein de façons de travailler ce volet-là, là, le volet historique. Là. Moi, je suis curieuse, Bradley, I'm going to switch to English, sorry. Bradley, I'm curious, have you already thought of how you want to try looking at the historical portion of your CCP process?
For the history, there's work being done in our cultural and language department. Kind of going back and seeing, where we started, where we've been, and up to this point. And I had no plans to like really look into but hearing everyone and how I think it is important to understand where we've been and finding out who we are as a community now, and that's our next step to go forward. But for me, it was more like setting a foundation for communicating with the community, because I don't know if you were going to ask that question later on about the communication tips, or should I wait?
I mean, go for it. You're in it, and then we'll go to Nancy's question.
Yeah. So for me, fairly new to the CCP process. So when I first stepped into the role, I was trying to engage the community, but I was like, what tools do I use to communicate with the different groups? And at the time, we only had social media, Facebook, the radio station broadcasting, and they were inviting me to re-establish the newsletter. But there were many trainings that I took in my first year, and I learned that a community should have at least 6 channels of communication to reach different community members, especially in emergency situations. But to go through the 6 channels, again, I already explained, a newsletter is a very, very good way to, reach the elders and almost any community member in the community. Social media, not just sticking with one app, but expanding to other apps that youth use, Instagram, TikTok, and things like this. Recently, Long Point just established their new website, longpointfirstnation.com. So I was very, very happy to be involved in that project and to showcase, our community, our culture, our departments, So this was not only for just community members to stay informed, but for outside, communities and organizations to know who we are looking in. And currently we're establishing or we're working on getting a communications app, you know, to stay in touch with more of the youth. Well, anyone who wants to be involved in what's happening in the community. You know, we plan to share, you know, job postings, news, events, and anything, you know, that the community should get to know right away. So, having a multi-platform approach to, communicate with your members is, I think, essential for any community, because, no single method reaches everyone. So, you have to, mix it up and, be consistent with your messaging, have, monthly updates, weekly updates, just to keep the members informed and engaged, and get the youth involved as much as you can to, lead some of these communication efforts. We want to bridge that gap between generations. And I'm very happy that the Youth Council are getting more involved in the communication efforts. So I'm very, very happy with that. And there's a lot of things that I've noticed that doesn't work when when you're working with communication, like assuming that social media alone is enough. Many members prefer traditional methods. People were happy when I brought back the newsletter, and it was very great to see that it's even myself. I never really wanted to post and share on social media, but I had to come out of my shell to do that. But I also noticed that there's more ways we can share information, and not to have that one-way communication as well. That engagement has to be interactive. It's not just leadership sending out information. We want to get that feedback from the community members as well. And recently, or I've noticed that our community was waiting until there was like a crisis to communicate. So our planning and things were like that were often reactive. We only did it when there was a big issue, but now we're learning that the members need regular updates, regular events, not us addressing it when there's a major issue in the community. So my journey with communication, to set the foundation of how I want to engage with the community, has been like that spiral. I'm always revisiting different things, and I'm very, very happy to bring these communication methods to the community. Yeah, Francine, you had a question?
Yeah, no, you just reminded me as you were talking about the role that the Youth Council played, and when going back to the question of how did we look at the historical and going back and looking at who we are and finding all that. But so what the Youth Council did is they planned what they wanted. They had the choice of where do you want to focus. So it was on governance. And they ended up planning a whole a virtual session around governance. It was one of the sessions that we held. So I think we had 34 youth that participated, and it was interesting in the way that they approached it, because they said they wanted to decolonize. They were very clear that we need to decolonize. So then they did things like, okay, they had you fill out a form to participate in the session and everything, and then they read, are you from on reserve, off reserve, or and they asked us to fill, and so we looked at it and we said, you think we talked like this before? Or we never divided ourselves like that. That's a colonial idea, or an oppressive idea in some ways. And so they redid all their forms, and they asked people, where are you calling? Are you calling from the territory today, or are you coming from the territory? And they registered in this way. And then when you start using words differently, you start to think differently. And that brought us all the way back to looking at some of the ancestral practices around governance. And then so when they held a session, they asked questions, and they did look at an historical document that was not written by us, but written geez, 18 some, and it was a description of who the Algonquin were, and in that document it had which families lived together. So then it really jotted their mind to how were we structured, and we lived in small families moving around that whole territory that I spoke about in my introduction. And so that was our governance, and how did we do this? And then they started to find out things, when we talked with the elders, the elders said, we used to know how many beavers were in the whole territory. We knew if the population was expanding or it was contracting, and when we should hunt. And because the families had responsibilities of keeping track of the number of beaver lodges and then the beavers. So when we came together, we would have that information. So they heard stories like this and how people interacted, and that really made them go back to thinking about, okay, what is our ancestral practices? And then they rebuilt the whole governance structure around what that is. We know people talked about a water chief. They talked about how we represented the people in the territory. And so, and then it was like, okay, let's get rid of the Indian Act. And, and that wasn't my influence, although I've taught that for a number of years. It's known as my soapbox, but they came to that realization themselves, and saying, okay, so if we're going to restructure, what does it look like? And they moved from having a chief and council under the Indian Act to having a council of chiefs that were represented by the family structures throughout the territory. That became the whole governance chapter. I didn't change anything. I just, how they proposed it, how they would like to do it became the chapter in the final report, because they just nailed it. But it brought us back again to who are we and who were we? So again, going back to that historical place was, you just need it for your grounding. So that's kind of one of the ways it came out in the planning, which I would have never expected.
Miigwech, both of you, Francine and Bradley. I'm going to switch to French for a second. Avec les conseils des jeunes, vous aviez clairement des gens qui étaient super impliqués puis super motivés. Kimberly, je sais que chez toi aussi, vous avez un comité PCG qui a été mobilisé du début à la fin. Il y a eu des moments où les gens étaient un petit peu moins mobilisés pour toutes sortes de raisons tout à fait légitimes. Mais de ton expérience à toi, Kimberly, puis après, je vais ouvrir la question aussi là, à Bradley puis Francine. Qu'est-ce qui aide là, à mobiliser les gens, surtout dans des démarches à plus long terme, là, comme la PCG? C'est quoi qui aide de ton côté?
Ben, je pense peut-être d'arriver, je sais pas comment dire, avec sûrement qu'elle est déjà structurée. Là, je suis certaine à la connaître qu'elle est structurée puis qu'elle a déjà un petit plan de match. Mais peut-être d'arriver avec un petit plan de match. Puis aussi, là, je vais dire de quoi qui va être drôle, mais la nourriture, tu sais, des fois, juste une petite collation, ou pas toujours nécessairement, parce qu'on veut pas non plus rendre ça récurrent. Je pense qu'on vise pas ça non plus, mais peut-être des petites, je sais pas, un bubble tea à midi, un exemple. Fait que je pense que ça serait ça pour moi.
Fait que l'idée de les remercier, de reconnaître leur engagement, puis
Oui.
d'avoir un plan de match clair pour que les gens sachent qu'est-ce que ça change qui s'implique.
Oui, parce que j'ai pris la bonne habitude qu'une amie m'a donné comme ça, de dire qu'elle est en gratitude souvent. Donc, ça me ramène en le disant aussi, on dirait que tu le vis, puis de dire que je suis en gratitude qu'il soit là aujourd'hui avec moi. Je pense qu'ils se sentent plus peut-être valorisés, puis un sentiment d'appartenance, de créer un sentiment d'appartenance au sein du groupe, c'est important. Ouais.
Écoute, Kimberly. Bradley, Francine, est-ce que vous avez envie d'embarquer aussi dans la question? I'm going to switch back to English for this one. Do you feel like, is there anything you want to add?
For me, if there's any advice, like Kimberly kind of touched upon it a little bit about, having something to come to, like it could be food. I know that we do a lot of incentives for the big events or big focus groups that we need to get the input from the community members. So, for major things like that, yeah, incentives do work, but like like Kimberly said, it shouldn't be a recurring thing, because we want them to come and be more engaged and not come for the incentive prize. And but one thing I might have noticed on my end, it might be the lack of communication or the way we share the information. If we're not clear on when it's happening, where it's happening, and what is the goal, I think some members might be hesitant to attend, or they might just not be willing to. So it's kind of like with that communication bridge, you're kind of building, trust among among the departments, whoever's hosting the event, and the members who you're trying to engage. And I forget, I think it was in the last webinar, it was more going back to the roots as well, having more, like engagement sessions, on the land, having it, around, a campfire in the evenings, for me, I'm trying to think out of the box into more, traditional methods rather than, doing it in the work hours, between, 8 and 4:30, where, many of the people are still at work and nobody wants to do it, after work. So it's kind of thinking out of the box and trying to, for me, I'm learning to try to go back to more, land-based and, cultural ways of, engaging with the community. So I'm waiting for, the summer for it to warm up. So, we can go do more things on the land rather than, booking a venue with, chairs and tables, I want to engage them more outside. So that's my next step. And I think that's my advice I would give you.
Miigwech, do you want to add something to that, Francine?
Yeah, so in the communities, you got to understand we have so many consultations going on. We have a whole department that duty to consult kind of thing, and people are constantly either engaged, and that's what was happening in our community. There were referendums, there were elections, there was a number of topics where they needed the elders committee. I think we worked our elders so hard because they were being consulted on everything. But that's an opportunity to piggyback on all those things and just show up, and at last you're just part of everybody, is what I found. And the other thing we did was, if only one person showed up, we held a meeting. And we held it for the whole time. And so one of the ones that the youth did, they did webinars, not webinars, how to build a website, and that they were trying to engage you. One person showed up and we took the whole 3 hours working with him. He thought it was the best thing that ever happened to him, because he had, he was there. Wow, if I would have known, I would have done more work, because I had access to all these experts. So, and that's important. It's you're going to get this done by little groups. There'll be some big meetings, but it'll be very one-on-one, one on five and kind of things. And don't forget about those personal invitations. Just going, having tea with somebody, going to the fishing tournament where you end up sitting at talking about a certain topic, and asking them if you could reference them. So all of these things are what like I said, I played golf. I got to talk to people in all these different settings, and they do add up after a while, because in the end we ended up talking with 600 people on different topics. And on top of the 32 sessions we did. So it was a lot of data and a lot of insight. And so much of it came from one-on-one sessions.
Yeah. Miigwech Francine. Sue says in the chat, she says, Miigwech Francine, sometimes I'm a bit discouraged, but it shows me that every step actually brings change. Kimberly, y avait-il autre chose que tu avais envie d'ajouter? Maintenant que tu as entendu tout ce que tout le monde a dit, y avait-il d'autres choses que tu avais envie d'ajouter, Kim? Ça va? Moi, je vais oser ajouter quelque chose parce que je connais Sue aussi, puis que c'est une femme exceptionnelle. J'ai envie de te partager aussi deux leçons que j'ai reçues de d'autres coordonnateurs et coordonnatrices en PCG qui ne sont pas là aujourd'hui, mais qui m'ont enseigné des choses. Une des choses, c'est Dawn Germain Metallic qui va être là la semaine prochaine, d'ailleurs. Si jamais vous voulez la rencontrer, elle sera là. Mais Dawn, elle m'a toujours enseigné qu'il fallait rejoindre les gens où ils sont. Tu sais, souvent, on a le réflexe de demander aux gens de venir à nous. Mais des fois, c'est difficile pour toutes sortes de raisons. Tu sais. Ils ont du travail, ils ont des enfants, ils ont un problème de santé qui ne leur permet pas de se déplacer, ils n'ont pas d'auto, ou l'horaire ne marche juste pas pour eux, ou ils ne sont pas confortables dans un gros groupe de personnes. Tu sais, il y a toutes sortes de raisons pourquoi les gens ne vont pas nécessairement venir à nous. Fait que, un peu comme ce que Francine disait, qu'il y a beaucoup de l'information qui va venir des rencontres plus individuelles. Je pense que quand on travaille en mobilisation communautaire, on n'a pas le choix si on veut vraiment atteindre notre objectif, qui est d'entendre le plus de voix possible, d'aller rejoindre les gens où ils sont. Fait que ça peut vraiment vouloir dire faire toutes sortes d'activités qui sont peu conventionnelles, puis c'est parfait comme ça. Fait que te donner le droit d'être créative, puis d'avoir du fun. Je le sais d'ailleurs que l'humour, c'est vraiment intéressant, surtout quand on travaille des sujets qui sont pas faciles. Il faut trouver une façon de réussir à avoir du fun quand même. Puis, Bradley il disait, fais des trucs dehors, fais des choses en cercle, tout ça, ça aide. Puis, l'autre chose aussi que j'aurais envie de te partager, c'est une leçon que j'ai reçue d'une autre de mes mentors en PCG qui s'appelle Jessie Hemphill. Puis, elle mentionne souvent l'importance d'organiser les activités de mobilisation selon les saisons. Parce qu'il y a des saisons où c'est plus facile de se regrouper, puis il y a des saisons où ça ne l'est pas. Tu sais, si tu veux faire des activités plus en territoire, tu le sais mieux que moi, qu'est-ce que c'est bien comme timing à faire chez vous. Puis il y a des périodes, tu sais, comme l'hiver, où on a besoin de se retrouver ensemble, de se raconter des histoires. Tu sais, l'automne, souvent, là, ça vient déprimant, ça fait du bien de se retrouver ensemble aussi. Fait que peut-être juste de penser à c'est quoi le cycle de mobilisation qui serait le mieux pour ta communauté, puis d'y aller avec ça, selon les saisons. Fait que c'est les deux enseignements que moi j'ai reçus que j'avais envie de partager aujourd'hui. Voilà, c'est rare que je fais ça. J'ai pas oublié la question de Nancy, fait que j'ai envie d'y revenir et je vais la poser à tout le monde. Donc, Nancy a posé la question, c'est vraiment une question par rapport à la collecte de données. Donc, comment on fait pour rapporter avec justesse ce que les gens vous partagent? Et puis aussi de tirer des conclusions quand vous recevez plein de données différentes. Donc, quand vous faites les activités de mobilisation, les gens partagent plein de rêves avec vous, plein d'idées, plein d'enjeux qui sont tous différents. Comment vous faites pour mettre tout ça ensemble et en tirer des conclusions? C'est la question. Tout en respectant la richesse, la diversité de ce que les gens ont partagé. Oui, Francine.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry. I thought you wanted to speak. I saw your hand. I was like, go ahead.
No, that's a hard question to answer, but I did was thinking about how to do that because, like I said, I gathered a lot of data, and I had different, like 32 different sessions. But what's interesting is the first session I did was with three women from my community, and it was on identity. And what came and at that session we had about, I think, 28 people that came to the session. They were mostly elders. So I think almost every family was represented at that session. There was three ladies that were from the community. Were all either they had just completed their PhD, they were a PhD candidate, or or they had just done so much work on these areas, or they were innovators. And we had one of the best discussions. When I went and I recorded it and I typed it out. When I went, because I wanted to be precise on that. When I went to do the analysis, I read it and it was like it didn't say anything to me. Maybe there were a couple of points that, that 3 or 4 salient points, and then a couple of others. So what I did is I went back and I read it word for word and a sentence at a time. And what I realized is that just one word, and many people will say that Algonquin language is an economical language. We have one word that means many things. So when you start thinking about people thinking they're an original language, you start to see, and so this word for word analysis of what they said actually generated a whole model. And in talking about identity, they were talking about sovereignty, and they in the center of all of this was Anishinaabe, which was our language, right? But around that, they were talking about sovereignty. They were talking about identity as interactions. They were talking about it as identity as culture and land, and how we form our thinking, and then finally space, how we react with space. I would have never found that out had I not done a word for word sentence analysis and just starting saying, what is she really talking about? What was she really saying? Or what was the elder really reacting to or describing in that discussion? And then that's what it came out to be, which has served as a model for a lot of the report that I ended up doing. But it was very interesting in that sense. But again, I don't think, if I didn't know, if I didn't have the Algonquin lexicons beside me, if I didn't have, know some of the history and the background of our people and who they were, and just some of our customs and our governance system and our culture and all that, I don't think I would have ever picked that out. So it's very contextual, I guess, is what I'm saying.
C'est intéressant que tu parles de la langue francine parce que moi, j'avais fait une activité avec les aînés, mais j'avais utilisé le français. Puis il m'aurait fallu un interprète parce que je ne parle pas Anishinaabe, mais dans le fond, il m'aurait fallu un interprète pour qu'il puisse interpréter la langue pour que les aînés puissent comprendre mes questions. Parce que sinon, il me disait qu'il comprenait, mais les réponses ne faisaient pas nécessairement sens. Fait que, tu sais, je comprends l'importance de la langue vraiment que. Puis j'avais été au café rencontre. En plus, j'avais été à leur lieu de rencontre. Ça, c'est intéressant, mais il manquait le côté langue. Fait que c'est juste ça que je voulais ajouter.
Miigwech, ben oui, c'est vraiment une bonne leçon. Puis pour ça, tu sais, tantôt Bradley, il parlait de la spirale de planification, là. Ben, c'est vraiment comme ça, la planification communautaire. Tu sais, la première fois qu'on le fait, on apprend plein de choses. Puis tout ça, c'est ça qui nourrit le cycle d'après, tu sais. Fait que tu le sais que, il y a ça. Ben, la prochaine fois, je sais que je vais pouvoir ajouter cet élément-là aussi, tu sais, ou tu peux déjà l'intégrer dans la manière dont c'est mis en œuvre. Fait que j'aime vraiment ça, l'image que Bradley nous a amenée, parce que c'est vraiment ça. Puis l'idée, c'est que ça nous ramène toujours plus proche de qui on est, plus proche de notre vision. Fait que c'est vraiment, c'est important. Bradley, est-ce qu'il y avait quelque chose que tu avais envie d'ajouter? Oh, sorry. Bradley, is there anything you wanted to add about bringing different voices together, I guess?
For now, no, I can't really think of anything I can say to kind of answer the question. Just right now, I'm in the journey of reaching them. So instead of, yeah, I'm almost, maybe next year's webinar, I might be able to answer.
Awesome, miigwech. Juste avant, I'm going to switch back to French, I apologize. Juste avant d'aller à la pause, Kimberly, j'avais le goût de te demander parce que tu as quand même fait vraiment beaucoup d'analyses de données aussi, puis tu l'as fait avec ton comité PCG. Comment tu as trouvé ça de travailler cette analyse-là en équipe plutôt que, mettons, le faire toute seule dans ton bureau?
C'est sûr que moi, j'ai trouvé ça plus facilitant qu'il y ait des gens qui nous aident, comme vous qui est venu aussi pour la collecte de données, l'analyse, pardon. Puis dans le fond, c'était vraiment un processus, je sais pas comment l'expliquer. Au début, j'avais peur, en fait. Je vais être honnête, ça fait peur parce que tu vois toutes les données, mettons, nous, c'était dans un tableau Excel. On avait tout rempli nos données à chaque rencontre qu'on avait. Puis même, on les remettait dans un autre tableau. Fait qu'on avait vraiment comme 2 tableaux de backup, si je pourrais dire. Donc, pour chaque activité, on avait vraiment les données de ce que les gens nous répondaient, mais c'était souvent par sondage. C'était moins comme Francine. Ce que je trouve intéressant, Francine, toi, c'est par oral. Tu sais, c'est vraiment comme des discussions de la manière que tu en parles, là. Fait que ça aussi, ça aurait peut-être été intéressant parce que c'est oral beaucoup, les Anishinaabe. Fait que, tu sais, je pense que j'aurais pu faire différent, puis m'améliorer pour prochainement, pour la révision. Fait que c'est ça.
Miigwech, Kimberly. Oui, puis moi, quand on l'a fait avec vous, là, ce que j'ai trouvé vraiment beau, dans mon souvenir, puis tu me corrigeras, là, mais on l'a travaillé comme en 2 équipes. Vous aviez comme 2 sets de données complètes, puis les deux équipes travaillaient pour analyser les données, puis après ça, on a amené tout ça ensemble. Fait que ça permettait vraiment d'avoir différentes perspectives parce qu'il y avait des choses qu'on ne comprenait pas toutes et tous de la même façon. Fait que ça a été quand même un beau défi, ça.
Non, le but, ça a été de séparer justement les données selon les 8 sphères. Puis tantôt, il me manquait développement économique aussi, que j'ai oublié de dire. Fait que j'aime bien le préciser, là. Donc, ouais.
Oui, puis comme Francine a dit, on a quand même beaucoup porté attention au contexte de chaque information aussi, parce que dépendant de la question à laquelle les gens répondaient, la réponse ne veut pas du tout dire la même chose. Là. Fait qu'on voulait vraiment s'assurer toujours de garder chaque information qui avait été partagée dans son contexte. Fait qu'on a beaucoup travaillé cet élément-là aussi.
Yeah, it's important to realize there will be views that are so divergent from each other, and you can't reach that consensus all the time. But if you note it, when you bring all the other information together, you start to see certain values that flow from that. Where there is a lot of consensus, like it's very strong, even if the discussion over here wasn't that, it was not all there were so many different views on it. But in the end, when you started to put together, at least, and that was my experience, along with Catherine, who I phoned all summer because I had to talk a lot of pieces of it through. But that vision does come out, and it's very cohesive. That was my experience.
It is. And for the record, I was very, very, very happy every time you called. Sometimes I was out in the woods and I had my phone and we had a great discussion, and yeah, it was awesome. Anyway, I think this is a great place just to take a short break. But when we come back, I think this is a good place to start, Francine. Like maybe we can start talking about the vision and how this emerges. Because I know like both you and Kimberly, you had to give some thought as like what vision are we working towards, and then how do the values emerge from all of the data. So when we come back from break, if you're okay with that, that's where I would take us. So before we went to break, Francine, we started talking about creating a vision, and in your case, I think you said it was more than one vision. And so maybe you want to tell us a bit more about how those visions emerged, and then how you identified the values that were that were in the plan already.
Well, so yeah, bringing all the information together was like I said, it was really hard. There were a lot of differing views on some issues. On some, it was very clear. Again, it went very much back to the language. It went very much back to just in kind of pulling out the salient points, the points that were coming up again and again. So there was a whole chapter that I'd written on culture, because we separated language and culture. Oddly, because it's really hard to write both of them at the same time. So language was a focus and culture was a focus, and while they're highly related, it also took two different chapters almost to explain the findings and what people were saying about that. But once you looked at culture, you were really talking, what I found anyway, was we were really talking about the values of that are embedded in everything we do. The culture, all the practices we did, why did we do them? Why have we been doing them for 5,000 years? Why are they still guiding us? And that was one of the key things, like I kept coming back to, and in my thinking and talking to people, and they pointed out that we've been around for 5,000 years. And lived through many different struggles, what was it that made us so resilient? So that became a guiding question in helping to think about those values. And where did they occur again and again? And then it also took a look, it was important for us to look at, excuse me, I'm just going to grab a drink here. To take a look at where we were at, and Kitigan-Zibi, the community itself, where we were at is we were finding there was a clash of values, because there were some court decisions that impacted us in a big way. And so we were having people who returned to the community or becoming part of the community that had never lived with us for maybe 4 or 5 generations. And so we had people returning who had very different value systems than where we were. And we were like, even though we were related somewhere along the way, when you had the Indian Act, you had what was done to women, the losing of the status, all these things that intervened in our history and in our lives. You had all of a sudden that you were facing it. So, and for example, people wanted to exercise their hunting rights. But in Kitigan-Zibi, there are certain hunting practices and ways you do it and what you don't do that are followed. But a lot of the people that were coming back and were doing things very differently from what somebody who had lived there and been part of the community growing up. So we had to have that discussion. We had, and then really think about citizenship, about how do we plan for ourselves in the future, because these things were all going to be upon us. So again, it took a focus on, pulling out that information, and a lot of it I didn't know what to do with it, because the whole community didn't know what to do with it. So the answer was, we don't know what to do, and it's fine to say that. And there are going to be spots that you just say, but also at the same time, they're like I said, the youth talked about how do we reestablish ourselves as the governing people in our own land, the way we did it, and the way our ancestors did it, because that's what's kept us alive all these years. Again, looking for those principles and what does that mean? So you had to keep coming back to this, but but there are some, to me, it was resilience. To me, it was historical, who we are today from the past, and and it was actually one of the questions I asked in one of when I ran a lot of the session is, what do we have, what have we always had, what do we want to bring into the future? And there you start to get really specific answers. So you bring all those different type of approaches together, and then you start to see what values are very clear to people. And what I did is, and I was lucky because I was talking about this at the powwow. Actually, I had a booth at the powwow. I was trying to get land stories. And it turned out like all these different people. I mean, I had people from every nation around from Ottawa to visit on the second day that were giving me land stories, and but it was kind of interesting. But there were at one point, I was talking to one of the ladies I hadn't seen in a long time, and then she was there. I was telling her the work I was doing, and she was telling me some of the things that had happened to her, and then all of a sudden she said, "Wait a minute, I'm going to get my mother." So she brought her mother, who's an elder in our community, and it was, and like, I mentioned earlier that one person you talk to, their input's going to be so impactful. And we ended up talking about the creation story, which a lot of people, by the way, either didn't know in our community or forgot our creation story. But she reminded me some things about it, and the things she pointed out, which made a lot of sense to me, because she was talking about canoes and how we started with canoes, and canoes is you have your Algonquin or your Anishinaabemowin lexicon, your dictionaries. Canoe has the longest explanation out of all the words. Some have one word that explains, the meaning. Others, this one had pages. And she talked about who we are in that context. And then she said, you can paddle alone for a while, but you cannot paddle far if you're not doing it together. And then that stuck with me. So when I was writing up the vision, that word together became part of every set. Together we are going to walk down this road together. It was just, and she arrived right at the point and gave me this story, or shared this story and her thoughts with me right at the point where I was starting writing. So your teachers come to you when you need them, as the elders always say. And then once I had some key ideas like resilience, like the word together, and started to use that in writing down the information, it just flowed easy, and the vision where there was a lot of where we all thought the same thing, that just flowed. That's kind of the way it worked out. So.
Glad, Francine. Wow, lots of lessons in there. I particularly love the question of, what was it that made us so resilient? It really speaks to how we work in CCP, and that we always use what we call a strength-based approach. So we don't plan from what's missing. We plan from who we are, those places of resilience, those places of strength. So I'm going to switch to French, and I'm going to ask Kimberly a question along those lines. Kimberly, toi aussi, tu as fait quand même tout un chemin avec les valeurs en écrivant votre plan communautaire. Comment ça s'est passé pour toi de découvrir ou redécouvrir c'est quoi les valeurs qui étaient au cœur de qui vous êtes comme Abitibi?
Ben, ça a été aussi un processus qui a été spécial. Je m'attendais pas à ça. C'était vraiment... ça n'a pas été facile, je trouvais. Mais en même temps, quand on l'a trouvé, ça a découlé, tu sais, ça a sorti. On écrivait au début, puis là, dans le fond, on a fait comme un comité de travail plus... En fait, moi puis Darren, on a travaillé ensemble beaucoup sur le projet. Puis parce que Darren, il fait partie encore du comité de la PCG. Puis ça a vraiment... Mais j'aimerais ça vous le lire, si je peux. Je peux-tu? Oui, OK.
Ben oui.
Fait que j'aimerais ça vous le partager. Fait que dans le fond, notre énoncé de valeur, c'est nous sommes engagés à prendre soin de notre culture, de notre langue, de notre communauté et de notre Abitibi-Winnie acquis. Nous sommes fiers d'être Anishinaabe et de transmettre nos valeurs de partage, d'entraide, de respect et de sagesse aux prochaines générations. Fait que c'est ça. Puis dans le fond, on s'est vraiment basé sur la collecte de données. Fait que comme Francine a dit, tout ce que les éléments que les gens disaient, ben ça ressortait. Fait qu'il y avait beaucoup d'aspects d'entraide, de respect, de Abitibi-Winaki, le territoire, l'importance du territoire, la culture. Donc, on a tenté de mettre notre énoncé dans vivante.
Wow, c'est magnifique. Je vais juste être curieux, je vais quand même demander à Bradley aussi parce que mais je vais y reposer la question en anglais. Bradley, I know you're at the beginning of the process, but I remember vividly one of the first times you and I spoke. We were doing an interview for the future regional planning website that we were working on, and we asked you what were some of the key pieces for you as you started as a CCP coordinator for Long Point First Nation. And you already had a pretty clear idea of what were some of those strengths that you were like rooting yourself in. So what are some of those values that are already present for you as you're starting this process? Oh, wait, I'll have to unmute you. There you go.
Yeah. I missed the first part of that because the translation,
Oh.
yeah.
Yes.
If you could just repeat the question, sorry.
Sure, it's all good. What are some of the values that are already present for you as you're starting this process? Like, what are the values that you're literally like grounding yourself in order to start this process?
Phew.
Yeah, just that.
Yeah, it's I mean, I always like want to like, root myself in the seven grandfather teachings, and I'm always, trying to, share the same teachings, and I guess it's more like more oh I'm trying to I'm trying to think back of what I actually said back then. But I know, like, my values have changed a lot since then, and I'm always pushing, for that, youth involvement for any kind of for any community, like the youth for Long Point, I want the youth council, to be the center of, the community's future, shaping the governance, leading engagement, leadership, and just just owning the just having ownership for the plan that we want to make. It was said a lot today. Planning shouldn't be driven by external organizations out there. It must reflect the voices of the community, and I'm always pushing for that youth voice to be the future of any community. So if I want to, incorporate all the values of the seven grandfather teachings as much as I can, but if I can showcase one, it would always be, humility, because humility for me, it's, I don't like showcasing, my own personal, goals and things like that, but I like to showcase, the collaboration that I have with everyone. It's CCP. It's not just a Bradley plan. It's a community plan. So, it's for me. I try to incorporate all the seven grandfather teachings, but it's yeah. You kind of caught me off guard with the question there, and I try to find a perfect way to go about it. But yeah, I think that's what I can share for now. English.
Miigwech. Humility is a powerful place to start. Very powerful place to start. I would say the first teaching I got around humility was around it being like being willing to take your place in the circle and not being the whole circle, or not being outside, or not being in the center, but being really willing to take your place in the circle. And what a place to start when you're doing CCP, right? Being willing to fully stand there in circle with the rest of your community and being yourself, and the vulnerability of being willing to see others for who they are and to be yourself, be seen for who you are. So wow. I might have caught you on guard, but look at where you brought us. Miigwech, Bradley. There is just a comment from Vivian in the chat, and I think that one might be for you, Francine, but it might also be for everyone. Vivian says that she's really grateful for all of you for sharing your experiences, and she wants to know if there's a place online where she can read some of those chapters from your CCPs, because she works in Kahnawake, and they've been working on implementing the community wellness plan, and I have been witnessing a little bit of Vivian's work. They've been doing amazing work on the community wellness plan. And so now she says that they're working on questions like governance and how to move into action planning. So she'd be really happy to be able to see some of the things that you've done in your communities. So if some of you are willing after, just maybe like send me an email, and I can put you in touch with Vivian if you want to do that this way too. And she also put the link to their community wellness plan. So if you want to visit and see what they've been working on, the link is in there. Ngoa, Vivian, it's exciting to see the kind of work that y'all are doing in Kahnawake. One of the things I wanted to come back to was something that you, Francine, you mentioned before, which was this idea of bringing in those citizens, those members that have been in some ways returned to your community. And I think it also speaks to engaging also those of your citizens or members that live outside of the community. They're members, they're citizens, but they're not living necessarily in the community. So are there ways that you found to engage and start bringing them in? Like, are there some community engagement ways or some communication tools that are more helpful to bring them in? Oh, wait, I'll just unmute you. There you go.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. No,
Oh.
that's
Let's see, Ale, Kimberly. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
go
okay.
ahead, Kim. Oh, that is a really hard question because so many times it happens that we communicate within community, and then the rest kind of get information when they get information. But again, I go back to the youth council. Like I'd have meetings with my youth council, and one would be like in California and Australia. They were very mobile people. So, and we did have meetings where like nobody was actually in the community, where they were just all over Canada or different places. And it really showed me that we can communicate all over. And we have to change our thinking about what community is. A community is not just that reserve that we, that we were put on. It's about the whole territory, and that was the biggest point I think that came out of the community plan, is how do we start thinking like that? And and every time you heard that on reserve, off reserve, that's a colonial term, and we don't want to hear it. And now it's just everybody says it. So really minding how we're defining ourselves, really minding about where the territory is, or what has been our traditional territory, And once you start talking again in different concepts with different words, it opens up and it invites other people in is what we found. And so we tried to use that approach. The youth, like I said, the youth council was very good at it because they're young, they're using all kind of social media. But we did hold some sessions, not, outside of the community where we put it on Facebook. We told everybody to let everybody know that this meeting was happening. We did reconnect with a lot of people we hadn't I didn't know and didn't even know we were related to. Um, and then once you start doing that, it just feeds on itself, right? And more people feel part of a community or at least open to being invited, um, that there's an open invitation there. And so we had some of that. Um, and the other thing, and this is what the youth council did, and it's part of, I hope this vision comes to be in the future. Um, One of the things they talked about is we need community development is not only about the community, it's about bringing our nation together, all our communities within the nation. And my particular youth council was very set on that. How do we make that happen? Yeah, we have a lot of things to do in our own communities, a lot of issues that we're tackling, but at the same time, how do we connect to each other? How do we build and become the strong people that we will be once we're all connected up, moving in a certain direction. So they were very focused on that, and that helped, to bring in those people that may be returning, may have a different set of values or a different, just have different ways of seeing the world. So that was kind of some of the things that I think about real quickly. I'd have to go back and read the report, but I think those were some of the ways.
Go ahead, Bradley.
Just for Francine, I had, for me as well, I always had that in the back of my mind, to start that nation to nation, building. And I never knew how to approach it, but I always knew, the youth would be the major part in that. And I was just wondering if there's any contact information for your youth council that that LPFN council can, start that connection. Like, who is there like a chief
Well,
or
so the way the council worked is they were structured for the course of the study, and then once that was done, then because we had to have an endpoint to when their responsibility ended. I still and then we just had all this stuff happen in the community, and the CCP kind of got put on hold because they had to deal with just so many things in our community last year, and then we had an election. So a lot of things came into play there, and so they haven't fully picked it up yet. I think things are settling down in the community now, and they will have an opportunity to go back to that. And I'm hoping that the youth council gets reconstituted. But certainly I have all their names, and to do a reach out and introduce everybody wouldn't be a problem.
and I also see Catherine's link there to the youth council CCP page, I guess, on
Yeah,
Zoom.
yeah, they had.
So
Yeah,
I'll
you could
do a little browsing on that as well. But miigwech, thank you.
De ton côté, Kimberly, qu'est-ce que tu as envie t'avais-tu envie d'ajouter quelque chose sur comment mobiliser les gens qui habitent pas nécessairement dans ta communauté?
Oui, ben je sais que Darren, lui, ce qu'il avait fait, parce que c'était plus Darren qui avait touché ce volet-là, lui, il avait été à l'extérieur, fait qu'il faisait des sorties directement à l'extérieur, fait que, mettons, au cinéma, il allait à des places pour... Puis je pense qu'il sollicitait directement les familles par invitation aussi. Donc, c'est un bon moyen d'aller par les clans, comme un peu, là. Je dis pas qu'on vise les clans, mais tu sais, par un représentant de famille, par exemple. C'est mieux dit. Fait que c'est ça. Je faisais.
Oui, puis je pense que même Chantal aussi, quand elle était coordonnatrice, elle avait organisé des ateliers par famille aussi pour aborder là, certains enjeux plus autour de la culture, puis tout ça. Fait il y a plusieurs façons de rendre ça comme, je dirais, plus sécuritaire puis de favoriser la communication. Ouais. Francine, do you want to add something to this? Or
No, I think I'm good.
you're good? Awesome. I'm going to switch back to French for a second, mais je vais oser donner un exemple aussi. Là, pour ceux et celles qui étaient là la semaine dernière, il y avait Marie-Ève Bouchard, qui est la coordonnatrice en PCG de la Première Nation des Inuits, qui va aussi être là la semaine prochaine là, pour le dernier webinaire de la série. Puis Marie-Ève, elle mentionnait là, la semaine dernière qu'elle avait, dans leur cas, il y a plusieurs de ces membres-là qui reviennent à la Première Nation. Puis finalement, quand ils ont dû ajuster tout leur plan de match de mobilisation à cause de l'arrivée de la COVID, pour eux, d'une certaine manière, ça a été un avantage parce que vu que les activités se faisaient pas mal toutes en ligne, ça a vraiment permis à beaucoup de membres de la Première Nation qui habitent à l'extérieur du village de s'impliquer. Fait que pour eux, il y a quand même eu un avantage. Puis il y a beaucoup de membres qui ont participé aux activités en ligne. Puis des fois, c'était juste pour écouter. C'était juste pour en apprendre plus sur leur propre Première Nation, à laquelle qu'ils venaient de retrouver, en fait. Donc, ça a été vraiment quelque chose de bénéfique. Fait qu'il y a toutes sortes de façons, en fait, là, de s'assurer que les gens peuvent à nouveau avoir leur place dans le cercle. Fait que j'avais juste envie d'ajouter cet exemple-là, dont Marie-Ève nous a déjà parlé. Donc, c'est ça. Il reste une quinzaine de minutes. Et là, j'ai envie juste de mentionner aux participants qui sont là, premièrement, merci d'être encore là. C'est vraiment le fun de vous avoir. Si jamais vous avez des questions ou des commentaires, là, ça serait probablement le bon moment pour le faire, vu qu'il nous reste une quinzaine de minutes. Fait que n'hésitez pas, là, si vous écrivez dans le chat, je vais vous lire et partager ce que vous dites aux panélistes. Sinon, ben, je vais me tourner vers vous, nos panélistes, je dirais pour la dernière question de la journée. Et la question, puis je vais commencer par toi, Kimberly, si ça te convient. La question que j'avais envie de vous poser à la fin, c'était autour de l'idée de la planif autochtone, de la planif communautaire globale, comme une façon, comme on dit depuis tantôt, là, de reformer le cercle. Puis, j'étais curieuse, c'est quoi ta vision, Kimberly, de ce qui est la planification communautaire puis la mobilisation dans l'avenir? Qu'est-ce que tu vois pour ta communauté ou pour les communautés en général? C'est quoi les éléments de vision que tu as envie de partager là, avec les participants?
Ben, moi, je pense que je vois une autonomie, puis c'est ça, de l'autonomie, puis du leadership, puis que les gens prennent leur place, puis comme que je dis, je reviens encore à tantôt ce que je sais, mais de bien s'accompagner, de ne pas avoir peur, de ne pas être gêné. Puis des fois, c'est pas évident, on est timide, puis on a peur de déranger, mais de prendre notre place, peu importe ce qu'on a vécu, je pense que c'est important, là. Ouais.
Puis qu'est-ce que tu inviterais les participants à faire là, quand ils vont retourner chez eux? Qu'est-ce que tu as le goût de les encourager à faire?
Bonne question. Je les encouragerais s'ils sont sollicités, de prendre le temps de répondre aux questions parce que c'est vraiment important d'être mobilisés à leur place, mettons. Je sais pas comment dire, là, mais ouais, d'être mobilisés, de participer activement dans notre communauté, c'est important parce que c'est comme ça que notre voix va se faire entendre.
Miigwech. Fait une invitation à oser se mobiliser, participer, faire entendre leur voix. Oui, je vais me permettre, avant d'aller à Bradley pour la dernière question aussi, je vais me permettre juste de te mentionner, Kimberly, tu sais, une chose que dont moi j'ai été témoin dans ta communauté à partir du moment où toi, tu es devenue coordonnatrice aussi. J'ai eu vraiment beaucoup d'échos de gens qui ont énormément apprécié la manière dont tu les as mobilisés, tu sais, qui se sentaient écoutés, qui sentaient qu'il y avait une place. Toutes sortes de monde, autant des élus que des gens de l'administration, que juste des membres de la communauté. Fait que je voulais juste te refléter ça. Puis quand j'ai vu les commentaires aussi tantôt des gens là, dans le chat, je sais pas si tu les as regardés, là, mais je pense que ton approche de mobilisation est super appréciée. Fait que ce que tu viens nous donner comme enseignement, c'est particulièrement précieux, tu sais, d'être patiente, d'écouter, de rassembler les gens, puis d'oser, tu sais. Fait que merci pour ton message. Il a bien été entendu, puis je vois déjà l'impact que tu as à travers les commentaires des gens. Je suis miigwech pour aujourd'hui.
Miigwech.
Bradley, I'm going to go to you. What are some of the vision elements around community planning and community engagement that you want to share with us today?
For LPFN, my future vision includes, that strong communication and transparency, every member, whether they're on or off community, must feel connected to that decision making. And yeah, that's, that combining, both, our traditional ways, our indigenous knowledge with the new technology that's, always coming to us, So using, these communication tools like websites, social media apps, but also, keeping, our tradition alive, our culture, our oral history, storytelling, having more, land, meetings on the land, just, not forgetting our culture and, having I said it before and said it many times, but having the youth involved in that planning is very essential for me. And I think that shows, real, true community ownership. So, if I have to invite, if I had to invite participants to do what their next step is what Kimberly said, just to build on that, start engaging now, like just do small steps and 10 meetings that or events that you're passionate about, answer surveys that are in your community, just help contribute to a better future. And I'm always pushing to empower youth. So encourage young people to be involved in governments and in governance now, and not just in the future, but keeping them involved as we go along. And then just continue to use different communication methods, find ways to reach all different groups in the community. And I think for me, those are the steps that I'm going to be following, and I invite everyone to do the same. So miigwech for giving me the time and the opportunity to share my vision for LPFN and the nation as well.
Miigwech, Bradley. And just before I go to Francine, we have learned a lot from you today. There are so many takeaways. I have 20 pages of notes already, but some of the things that the key pieces that I'd love to highlight are the care you put in making sure that everyone can have a voice, and also that everyone can have the information they need to actually feel comfortable and safe in participating and coming to share what they have to say. Great job. And you've given us a lot to think about all the different ways that you mentioned. Some of them I didn't even know about. It's like, oh, this is so exciting. And the idea that you need at least 6 different methods in order to reach everyone. And just the powerfulness of the message of having the youth be at the core of this, and to remind them of the skills they need from the get-go so that they can fully take their place. So many teachings that I'm leaving with today. So miigwech for your presence here and for all the teachings that you share with us always. And we're excited to see where Longport First Nation is going to take their CCP. Francine, last but not least, do you want to share some of your vision around community engagement, community planning?
Oh, I just loved what Kimberly said. The way she said it, just go out there, take your place, use your voice. Everything you said, it just is just perfect. And Bradley, how you summarized the idea that we have to engage everybody in reaching out and so that means technically we have to get with the program. I love it. I don't know if I can even add to that. It's a great vision, but I just like to say, for me, I guess it's that youth cohort, and I'm talking about the 25 to 40-year-olds that are going to be living this in the future. I hope we see them designing our governance, because governance leads on everything, and it's all of this should be steeped in the language. That's my vision. Everybody should be learning our language. To do this, because it gives us a certain way to think that connects us to our past, and the goal of bringing the nation together is that I think youth have, and I think they're ready for it. So how the vision maybe is not so much for the communities. I mean, it is for the communities to support them, but I also see the community planning circle that I've been a part of, which I participated. I was like, I don't want to participate in this circle. It's going to take up so much time. The community planning circle has a big role to play there in enabling that. We don't know what those steps are yet, because there's still a lot of people, when we talk about governance or we talk about what's happening in the community, they haven't made that shift yet. So there's a role for thinking about how do we make that shift so that it works for everybody. That's my vision for the future, and I hope we see the community planning circle, play a role there.
Miigwech, Francine. Well, you have taught us so much. You teach us so much. I mean, I told you this the other day, Francine, like a good chunk of the idea behind this webinar series actually came from you and from the reminders you had of the circle. And I love that you tell us that the circle wasn't, it wasn't the thing you wanted to do at the beginning, because it shows that it's in a way even more real. Like, you came to actually see that this is what you needed, and you learned from each other, and now you're giving back in so many ways by teaching us so much. And I want to say, I don't think we spoke about this, but when you shared some of the canoe teachings that you had received from the elder, Emmy and I, it blew our minds. We spent a whole day like just learning about it and feeling what it felt like from both of our perspectives. And so, yeah, I want to say I am grateful to be sitting in circle with all of you. And I want to acknowledge my friend and colleague, Emmy. She's in the attendees room right now because her family is going through hard moments, but she is still here. And so each of us do what we can in the circle. And this is what community planning is about, that each of us show up in whatever ways we can. And we're here for each other. So Miigwech, I am so grateful to have sat here with all of you this afternoon. This has been an incredible journey, as it always is when we get together. Before I close, I want to mention that we have another webinar next week. Oh, and let me switch to French because I speak in English so much. I apologize. Je vais le dire en français. Il reste un webinaire à la série. Donc, le webinaire de la semaine prochaine, c'est le 7e et dernier. C'est un webinaire qui, là, aborde vraiment la dernière phase de la spirale dont Bradley parlait. Donc, la semaine prochaine, on va parler de mise en œuvre du plan. Donc, comment on transitionne du plan, du document à l'action. Kimberly nous en a parlé un peu tantôt. Elle nous a donné un genre de petit aperçu de c'est le fun maintenant. Quand ils font des actions à Picogan, ils peuvent se baser sur les priorités que les gens ont déjà identifiées. Bien, si ça vous a titillé, la semaine prochaine, c'est 100% là-dessus. On va aussi parler de comment on fait le suivi comment on mesure le changement qui est là. Puis là, Francine va être avec nous la semaine prochaine, qui a une très longue expérience en évaluation. Fait qu'elle va nous aider à y voir un peu plus clair dans comment on fait pour suivre le changement. Donc, il y a Francine qui va être nous la semaine prochaine. Je vous ai déjà dit, il va y avoir Marie-Ève Bouchard, la coordonnatrice en PCG de la Première Nation des Inuits-Sipites, qui va être là aussi. Il va y avoir Roy Wischi, qui est coordonnateur PCG et planificateur communautaire pour sa communauté, Waskaganish Cree Nation, qui va être là aussi. Et le webinaire va être co-animé par ma collègue Amy, que vous connaissez déjà, et par Dawn Germain Metallic, qui a été la coordonnatrice en PCG pour les Stigouches et qui va co-animer la session la semaine prochaine parce que moi, je n'y serai pas. Je vais être en train d'animer un atelier à Ganawagi. Donc, c'était mon dernier webinaire avec vous aujourd'hui pour ce cycle-là. Donc, je vous invite vraiment à être là la semaine prochaine. Si vous avez envie, il va y avoir encore vraiment des histoires intéressantes. Et si vous êtes des gens d'action, ben, c'est pour vous. Donc, en terminant, je remercie bien entendu mon collègue Nicolas qui a fait la technique aujourd'hui. Merci Nicolas. Je remercie Mike Lemay et Caroline Chandonnier pour l'excellente interprétation encore une fois. On se dit déjà la semaine prochaine avec vous. Merci à tout le monde qui était dans la salle. J'espère que vous allez retourner chez vous bien inspiré. N'hésitez pas à nous faire signe, à nous écrire là, si vous voulez entrer en contact avec quelqu'un ou si vous souhaitez en savoir plus. On est vraiment toujours content de parler de planification avec vous. Bien entendu, Chimigwach à nos panélistes aujourd'hui. Et en terminant, j'aimerais encore remercier vraiment du fond du cœur le territoire Anishinaabe qui m'accueille aujourd'hui. C'est un territoire magnifique, exceptionnel, généreux et plein d'amour. Donc, j'essaie de faire de mon mieux pour lui rendre. Donc, je vous remercie. Puis, bon retour chez vous, en sécurité. Prenez soin de vous. Et on se revoit la semaine prochaine. Bye tout le monde.